Good morning. Today is Tuesday, August 30th, 2022. This is the Urban Hope Refuge Morning Devotions. We are continuing our reading today from the 2022 Daily Bible Reading Guide published by the American Bible Society. For the month of August, we are reading under the theme, God's renewing word of mercy and forgiveness. Today, we are reading Genesis chapter 49, verses 29 through chapter 50, verses 1 through 14. And we are reading in the New International Version. The sub-theme, the death of Jacob, verse 29. Then he gave them these instructions. I am about to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave in the field of Ephron the Hittite, the cave in the field of Machpelah near Mamre in Canaan, which Abraham bought along with the field as a burial place from Ephron the Hittite. There Abraham and his wife Sarah were buried. There Isaac and his wife Rebekah were buried. And there I buried Leah. The field and the cave in it were bought from the Hittites. When Jacob had finished giving instructions to his sons, he drew his feet up into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. Chapter 50, verse 1. Joseph threw himself on his father and wept over him and kissed him. Then Joseph directed the physicians in his service to embalm his father Israel. So the physicians embalmed him, taking a full 40 days, for that was the time required for embalming. And the Egyptians mourned for him 70 days. When the days of mourning had passed, Joseph said to Pharaoh's court, if I have found favor in your eyes, speak to Pharaoh for me. Tell him, my father made me swear to an oath and said, I am about to die. Bury me in the tomb I dug for myself in the land of Canaan. Now let me go up and bury my father, and I will return. Pharaoh said, go up and bury your father, as he made you swear to. So Joseph went up to bury his father. All Pharaoh's officers accompanied him, the dignitaries of his court, and all the dignitaries of Egypt, besides all the members of Joseph's household and his brothers and those belonging to his father's household. Only their children and their flocks and herds were left in Goshen. Chariots and horsemen also went up with him. It was a very large company. When they reached the threshing floor at Atad, near the Jordan, they lamented loudly and bitterly. And Joseph observed a 7-day period of mourning for his father. When the Canaanites who lived there saw the mourning at the threshing floor of Atad, they said, the Egyptians are holding a solemn ceremony of mourning. That is why that place near the Jordan is called Abel Mizraim. So Jacob's sons did as he commanded them. They carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave in the field of Machpelah near Mamre, which Abraham had bought along with the field as a burial place from Ephron the Hittite. After burying his father, Joseph returned to Egypt together with his brothers and all the others who had gone with him to bury his father. This concludes our reading for today of Genesis chapter 49, verse 29 through chapter 50, verses 1 through 14. Well, the life of Jacob has come to full circle. And one of the things that we can see throughout the life of Jacob is that he believed God, he was faithful to God, and he finished his course on God's side. Joseph, in the verses that we just read in chapter 49, beginning at verse 29 to the end, going into chapter 50, the first 14 verses, you can see that Joseph honored his father. He always honored his father. And it shows us that by Joseph living by faith, Joseph did not do this on his own, but because he was living by faith, he was able to honor his father. Jacob had a desire and a wish, and that was to be buried in the place where Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Rebecca, and Leah were buried. That was what he wanted to happen with his remains after he had died. Jacob did not want his body to be buried in Egypt. And I think we all know why. And I think we can all understand that because a promise had been made to Jacob's father. And Jacob wanted to receive that blessing. So he made provisions for it while he was alive. But the thing of it is, he had to trust his sons to carry it out for it to come to full circle for him. And we don't even have to guess who he would trust to do that. He entrusted that to Joseph, his beloved Joseph, whom he had lost for 20 years, thinking that he was dead. But look at how God works, saints. Jacob had a vision and a wish in his heart. He would use his youngest son to carry it out, although his youngest son was dead and missing for 20 years. But Joseph did not want to be buried. Jacob did not want to be buried in Egypt, but he wanted to be buried in the land that was promised to Abraham and all of the generations of Abraham. God promised them Canaan. And Jacob did not want to be buried anywhere but what God had promised. So he's on his deathbed and he calls his sons, he gathers all of his children together, all of his sons, and he shares with them what his deathbed wishes are. You all have had some experiences with loved ones, with relatives on their deathbed, and the things that they said on that deathbed, you held on to it. I know that I have. Even though Jacob was on his deathbed, he said the things that he needed to say and wanted to say, that he had to depend on others to carry out. Now, let me tell you, my deathbed experience with my husband, I have never seen anything like that before. There was a young couple. Actually, I saw her a couple of weeks ago with her two little girls in her car on my husband's deathbed. This couple wanted to be married, but they wanted the counseling from the pastor before that marriage. This young woman did not want to marry until her pastor had seen and given his blessing for that marriage. On his deathbed, he counseled that couple. That was 9 years ago. They're married today with two lovely young girls. He gave them his blessing on his deathbed. My son, our current pastor, brought a politician. We lived in Manchester at the time, brought him for my husband to talk to him and bless him. He was elected in that election, and it was he who saw to it that the state of Connecticut lowered the United States flag at the Supreme Court on the day of my husband's homegoing. He blessed these individuals, and they realized the things that they were experiencing in life were because of the blessing. They came for the blessing. I told you yesterday about the son in the gospel who had relocated to Atlanta and brought his children for the blessing. Pharaoh agreed with Joseph that he could do everything that he had promised his father. Let me tell you, there is something about favor. Favor carries with it mercy. Favor carries with it forgiveness. And favor carries with it favor. When Joseph told Pharaoh, or had his people to tell Pharaoh about what he had promised his father on his deathbed, the favor that Joseph received was that Pharaoh sent dignitaries of Joseph's court with him, and he sent dignitaries of the city, not the city, but of Egypt with him. And he gave them everything that they needed to do what was in the heart of Jacob that was passed on to his son on his deathbed. The scripture says, and I'm closing, that after Jacob shared everything with Joseph that he wanted him to know and to do, he said that he pulled his legs up in the bed and he died. These are God's renewing words of mercy and forgiveness. Now let me challenge you to pray your way through the day. Walk with the King, enjoy his favor, and be a blessing.